All right, welcome back to Chatterbox Bearcats, everyone. Chuck Walter with you, Nick Niehaus. We also got Ryan Hammer on the show today. Credentials upcoming, but of course the Bearcats trying to climb a little higher in the Big 12 this season. 6th in the preseason poll. Bearcats are ranked. They're number 20. First time talking to you all since the AP rankings came out. Again, this is Chatterbox Bearcats. You can find us on YouTube and wherever you stream your audio podcast. We're free and available after every single game. Whenever news breaks, we got content left and right. Ryan Hammer does the same thing. College basketball extraordinaire. He's a creator and specializes in the Big 12 conference. Really every conference, but a big Big 12 guy. So he's going to join the show, talk about who since he can leapfrog, stars of the season in the conference, a dark horse team in the Big 12. We got you covered. For those of you that haven't looked too much into the Big 12, Ryan's got you covered. What's up, man?
I'm happy to be here. I appreciate it. And, you said Big 12, I forget exactly how you framed it, like creator or whatever, but I don't think of myself like that. But then when you said it, I was like, you know what? I'm always defending the Big 12 and being a big supporter of them being the best conference for the last X whatever years, 5, 6, 7 years. And people are always on my ass. So I'll take it, I guess.
We'll take it. Why not? Let's jump right into this thing, man. Big 12 right now has 6 teams in the top 25. They got the number 1 team in the country in Kansas, the number 4 team in Houston, number 5 in Iowa State. That's 3 teams from the Big 12 in the top 5. The last 3 seasons, they've been the best team, or the best conference, rather, in KenPom and in 9 of the last 11 years. I mean, this is a juggernaut right now. Cincinnati falls in 6th in the conference behind Iowa State, Baylor, and Arizona, 3, 4, 5. Which of these teams can the Bearcats leapfrog to you based on what you've seen the last couple of years and what these teams bring in?
Yeah, it's tough. Like you said, like this conference is absolutely loaded. And those 5 teams, I think, is a fair, clear tier 1. I think the 3 in the top 5, but then there's 5 in the top 10. So all 5 of those teams are top 10 for a good reason. You kind of know, like the biggest thing for all 5 of those teams, you know exactly what you're getting. I don't think any of the 5 really are like this breakout hype team, honestly, kind of like Cincy is. But you know what you're getting out of Arizona and Baylor, Iowa State and Houston defensive systems. You know, Kansas is going to be probably ridiculous as long as they're healthy and firing on all cylinders right away. It's tough. I would say Arizona, maybe, especially in Big 12 play, because they're very good. They can play against any team in the country, any style, any conference. We've seen that. But because they are going to adjust a little bit in style, I think, and to playing Big 12 teams every single night versus Pac-12 teams, I'd say Arizona's probably the one.
I like that. I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, you think about the Big 12 and some of the transitions that these teams are making is not going to be easy. I mean, we saw that with Cincinnati in our first year in the Big 12 last year, coming from the American Conference. Now, the American had a few top-heavy teams with Houston, Memphis, and we were pretty good there for a few years with Mick Cronin until obviously John Brandon took over. But that's something I didn't even think about, that some of these teams are going to be transitioning from a Pac-12 schedule, and they're not used to the gauntlet of the Big 12. We saw last year with Wes Miller, the number one thing that we couldn't get done was these one-possession games. I mean, we lost about 7 of them. That's something that teams are going to have to adjust to. Any teams out there in terms of the tier 1 that you're especially high on? I know you just said that Kansas, obviously, they're going to be freaks, and they're loaded. But, I mean, obviously, it's easy to say Kansas. But any of those tier 1 teams that you really like?
Yeah, it's so hard not to like all of them, seriously. You guys asked me before the show if I'm a Baylor fan because of my profile picture. I'm not, but I always love the Baylor program. That's why I've kind of was comfortable putting that out there and stuff. I do like them a lot. I've been known to lean towards a lot of defensive teams. I've been a Houston appreciator and respecter for a long, long time. Kelvin Sampson in that system, even back to those AAC days that you mentioned. Love Houston, and I love the Iowa State team this year. They're basically the same exact team they had last year. They just add Joshua Jefferson and more experience. Like they're going to be an absolute nightmare to play against.
One thing I look at with Cincinnati this year is their rebounding from last year. They're the best team in the Big 12 a season ago, and I'm already proclaiming it right now, I guess, that they're going to be one of the best teams in the conference again this year. They add in Dylan Mitchell, who can snag it, the redshirt freshman Rayvon Griffith, who we didn't see at all in a single game last year. He apparently was the leader in rebounds per Wes Miller this preseason, offensively and defensively. So you add in Mitchell, you add in him. Connor Hickman's got vert, and could rebound all right for his position. So this is a team that I mean, old school Bearcat toughness, rebounding, block shots, alley-oops with Bandego can get it done the way they used to. But when you look at what they were missing last year in one-possession games and just their ability to score the basketball consistently and have a player to rely on, do you see that changing this year from what you know about Cincy?
That's kind of my one concern for the team is, Day and Dan Skillings, and you're gonna and Lukosius, like you have good players. Even Jizzle is gonna break out. Like I love Jizzle James like every half the country does right now. But someone's got to be the dude. It's probably gonna be Skillings, probably more often than not. But I don't think he's gonna make anyone really is gonna take this leap to a point where you have an 18, 17 point per game scorer that you're gonna go to. And I think that's kind of why the 3-point shooting, the foul shooting wasn't there last year. And that's kind of why the games were always so close. And a lot, like you said, 3, 4, 5 of them go the wrong way. And all of a sudden you're outside of the bubble and you're outside the tournament. That's my one question for Cincinnati. I think that's what limits their ceiling. If they don't have a go-to guy and if it is Lukosius and Mitchell and Dan Skillings and it's a balance of them and they're just giving off every night, that's fine. But I still want to see alphas on the team. I think that's the biggest leap for them.
Absolutely correct. I mean, that's one thing we went into last year thinking where, hey, we got 10 guys who can play, but we don't have one superstar. Now, Charlie already compared Jizzle James. Well, he didn't compare him. He said Jizzle James has the ceiling of Ja Morant on the last episode, which after watching his highlights, I don't think it's as crazy as I originally was like, okay, wow, that's quite a take. But no, we have crazy depth, but that is one thing I agree with you. Now, you did have a list for breakout players, and you had 2 of our players on there. You had Dan Skillings and you had Jizzle. Anything you like about their game specifically?
Jizzle's that kid is electric. You don't see kids like guys like that often, especially early on in their first and second years, and in the Big 12 nonetheless, and on a consistent basis. And he got better and better as the season went on. It felt like he's crafty, he's quick, he can get in the lane, he can shoot and score and play make and do kind of everything. And I think it's perfect for this team because he still might start on the bench because even though he probably shouldn't in a vacuum and stuff. But when you look at the roster, like Day is still that dude, he's still there, and you guys have dudes. So if he's coming off the bench, perfect spark plug. And even if he scored 8 or 9 off the bench last year, higher usage, more of a focal point when he comes on the floor. So hopefully he can bump those numbers up. And Dan Skillings is kind of like almost like a jack of all trades, or some, in my opinion, at least. You've seen him do a lot on both ends of the floor, and it's hard to find something that you don't like in him, and that's why I think he will be my one pick to be that guy. I hope that's right, but I guess time will tell. So
Since he hit that 6 spot, man, they're looking with the Big 12. You would think that's like 4 or 5 seed, 20th in the country. It's around that range of what they're probably projecting for Cincinnati, a team that can win a game or two in the NCAA tournament. Going down, you don't know about any of these teams from like 10 to 16. The Colorados of the world, the West Virginia with a new coach, BYU welcoming a new coach. Who's kind of like a dark horse after Cincinnati in the league, 8 through 16, who can, make some noise this year?
Yeah, the 3 teams I have behind, I think the poll has also K-State, BYU, and Texas Tech. I think it's in opposite order. Tech is probably the most respected right now going into the season, but BYU and Kansas State are not to be messed around with at all. I honestly think there's 9 teams. All 9 of the teams that we've talked about so far with them are top 30-ish, 35 caliber teams in the country. So I don't know if you classify them as dark horses. Maybe BYU is a little bit more than the rest because there's a lot of unknown, like you said, with new coach Kevin Young, a lot of new faces, a couple international guys. Igor Demin, the main one he's going to catch some eyeballs pretty early on. But those 3 are definitely getting love. I think UCF is one to watch. They just got a lot of talent. Everyone is looking at the JJ Taylor, Dior, Mikey Williams, and they have a lot of talent and ability. I'm excited to watch them hoop all together. But they're going to come off the bench. Like, they still have Sellers and Johnson, their backcourt duo from last year. Keyshawn Hall is, in my opinion, is one of the best transfers in the entire country this year. So they have a lot more talent than people expect. And Johnny Dawkins has kind of done a decent job, at least so far. And like y'all, a little bit of a transition coming into the Big 12. Maybe this is their year to start getting right also.
Yeah, I don't hate that pick. Getting into a little bit of a different, holistic view of the conference. I don't think there's any argument that the Big 12 has been the best conference in the last 5 years, like you said. SEC, they have more ranked teams than us preseason. What do you think? And be unbiased. I know me and Charlie are obviously biased. I want to hear your real opinion on if you think the SEC is a better conference than the Big 12.
No, I don't. I think the gap maybe has closed a little bit, and I think even KenPom actually preseason rankings has SEC above Big 12, but like by a thin margin or a hair. I think those top, like when you look at the top of the SEC, it's Alabama, drop off, and then to Auburn right outside the top 10. You got 5 teams in the top 10 for a damn good reason. And even if Arizona was or Baylor was switched with Auburn, like you still have Kansas and Houston at the top and Iowa State. Like it's not really like that. And I think the bottom of the Big 12 is better than the bottom of the SEC. Missouri won't be Missouri like last year, but they went 0-18 last year. The SEC always has a team or two like that where look at the bottom of the Big 12. Oklahoma State's going to be better. Arizona State's probably going to be towards the bottom, but they have a lot of talented freshmen and they could do some damage. West Virginia likely towards the bottom, and I think that they're going to be pretty good also, especially maybe more of a long-term view, but they can raise some eyeballs this year too. And I think the bottom is where it really separates. So I don't like if someone says, hey, it's the SEC this year in an unbiased way, I can debate about it, but I'm not going to have a full-blown argument over it.
This guy knows his basketball, man. Ryan Hammer, our guest today on the show, he's a Maryland Terps fan, and he can just recite the Big 12 like this from top to bottom. He's getting deep into the weeds on Central Florida. That's when you know a man respects his craft. I love that, man. So you got to know a little bit about Dylan Mitchell. To the UC fans that, have seen his highlight tapes but weren't watching a lot of Texas games last year, what do the Cats have to look forward to in Dylan Mitchell?
So I've been a big Dylan Mitchell fan since he got to UT. I was high on him coming out of high school. I was high on him last year. I'm high on him this year. The biggest thing for him, so the good things is that he's a freak athlete, like ridiculous above the rim athlete, and he looks like he's 6'9 plus, lanky. He can move well. He's mobile. He's going to put on some crazy highlight plays. He can defend with that athleticism pretty well. He's pretty intuitive at this point of his career, and he's getting it with more experience. But the biggest thing that hasn't come is his shot and ability to be the dude and handle, and UT kind of thought he could do that. When he tested draft waters, I think before last year, he shot amazing at the combine. And obviously it's uncontested training and practice and stuff like that and a lot of catch and shoot, but his form looked a lot better. He was hitting a lot of shots in a row. He looked confident in front of scouts on a pretty, what most people would say, nerve-wracking stage. And that hasn't really come. But UT used him pretty smart. They used him on a lot of cuts and backdoors and stuff like that and playing under the rack and almost playing like a small ball 5 or just a really mobile 4 at times. So I think with all the guards and guys that we talked about before, with you guys losing Victor, like he's a perfect guy to come fill in that role. So
I like that because Wes Miller said that we're going to be playing some small ball. So if we see Dylan Mitchell at the 5, I don't think there's going to be much of an issue because, you look at what we think is going to be our starting lineup. You can sub Jizzle or Day at starting point guard. Doesn't matter, not to my point, but everybody's 6'6" or bigger. So we got the Monstars for Cincinnati here on defense. That's something that I know that Cincinnati fans can appreciate with Mick Cronin, the way he ran the program for all those years, hard-nosed defense. Moving off of just specifically the Bearcats and now back to the Big 12, any specific players, now everybody probably knows about Hunter Dickinson, you know what I mean? But any specific players you're truly excited to watch?
I mean, there's a long list because I can think of every team. We talked enough about Jizzle. I'm not going to toot y'all's horn even a little more. It's not even a bias thing. Like I'm high on him. I'm excited for him. I think Kansas State duo. I think what Jerome Tang did with Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's going to be one for one exactly the same. Very, very similar play styles for Doug McDaniel and Coleman Hawkins. I think that duo together is going to be super fun to watch, lethal. They will win them games on their own, and they're going to be very exciting to watch. VJ Edgecombe at Baylor is one of the best freshmen in the country. He's a damn problem, too. He plays like a grown-ass man at the 2-guard spot. He'll be a top 5 draft pick. And then you guys seen a lot of players that were already in here last year, right? Like half of Houston's roster. Basically, LJ Cryer is going to be probably their go-to guy. Taman Lipsey is always fun to watch. I can always appreciate a nice POA defender up top running the team. Kansas is half of their roster after Hunter Dickinson, Zeke Mayo, AJ Storr, and whatnot. But even going down the list of the teams that people maybe don't pay enough attention to right now, Tucker DeVries, son of his father, Darren DeVries, the new head coach at West Virginia. He's going to be the focal point of that team. And I love JT Toppin. A lot of the country does now at Texas Tech. He's going to be a fun one to watch. Sophomore, New Mexico last year, tested draft waters. He'll be a big breakout candidate and in the best league in the country, so it's a big chance for him.
I want to ask you about the Cincy program as a whole, because it's not often, it's actually never on this show. Aside from Ice Cube, we had Ice Cube on, and he's an outsider. But aside from that, everyone we had on the show is kind of a Cincy fan or a Cincy media member. What are your thoughts on the program as a whole? You know, when were you introduced to this program? Your first impressions, players that come to mind, just all that fun stuff on like where you think this program is, because statistics say it's like a top 15 program of all time, but when you lose 6 times in a row to your, Catholic buddies down the street, it just feels a little different. So where do you see it from the national perspective?
What's the rivalry called again? I already forgot.
The Crosstown Shootout. It was the classic for a couple of years after a big old fist fight, but we're back to the shootout.
Yeah, the fist fight, exactly. Those are kind of the days that I remember as like a kid, at least, and the Big East days, I guess, or I guess it was Big East days a long time ago, like 2000s, late 2000s. That's kind of what I remember my first memories of. Can't recall players from then, at least off the top of my head, because I was a young lad. But the AAC days throughout the years, I will say for the future of the program, I have liked Wes Miller a lot. When they hired him, I was very excited. I actually wanted him to be the Maryland coach as a Maryland fan at one point. So that's an unbiased take, and I wanted him to be my coach. Love Kevin Willard for now. Not going to knock him or anything. But I think the program's going in the right direction, and I'm happy they got to join the Big 12 with the likes of like a Houston, because Houston's program, for example, they were taking it to ridiculous levels, right? But Cincy, I think when you look at the entire athletics program, where the quality is there, just like it is for Houston, it's just on a basketball level, it looks more exploded. It looks more granular, I guess, bigger for Houston and better. But I think the Cincy program is going in the right direction. I think a season like this could be huge for the Bearcats, because they haven't been to the tournament in like 5-6 years, something like that is my guess. Yeah, and obviously not with Wes Miller. It's not been since Mick Cronin days, I guess. But I think that would really help with recruiting. It would help with and obviously the resources are there. It would help take the program to new levels where they can try to become that perennial top 25 team, and then work their way up as they go. So,
what's crazy is you probably forget this, but pre-COVID, because that was the last time they made the tournament, they would have made it the COVID season where it was shut down. They probably would have been a bubble team, but it seemed like they were safely in that season. They don't get in. But you say Houston's in such a better spot, and it's, on the brighter stage, all this stuff. It's crazy because pre-COVID, it was like UC had won 40 of 45 or so. They'd won so many games in a row over the years, to where college basketball, just 5 years. That's all it takes for, someone to essentially say that Houston has leapfrogged Cincinnati. It's wild to hear, man. It's wild to hear.
It seems like this is the first year that we have some excitement building around the program, and everything is it seems like it's a next level. Obviously, it's our first preseason ranking in a long time. But I log on Twitter and I see Ryan Hammer with 150,000 followers talking about Jizzle James and Dan Skillings. So this is so first, I want to thank you for finally somebody on a national presence is taking notice of the Cincinnati Bearcats. It's been forever. So it really does feel like this is the first year where we had a rebuild of a few years. We had a coach that not a lot of people were excited about here in Cincinnati. So Wes Miller coming here, we're joining the Big 12. It feels like this is the first year where we're taking that next level, that next step up. Are you as high on the Bearcats as the whole city of Cincinnati is?
I'm not in the city, so I can't tell you. I do think that they're like a top 20 team in the country. So if I guess, and I was actually surprised to see the AP poll give them the respect, because it's not like the team ended up producing at an unbelievable level last year, and it's not like they're
Big 12, yeah.
Right, and it's not like they brought in players that are crazy, dynamic superstars like a lot of the other teams that everyone knows about. So I'm all here for the respect, and I'm excited for that. When is the Xavier game, by the way? The Crosstown Shootout? I got it right.
It's on ESPN.
December
Plus,
14th.
Of course,
December 14th. Yeah.
Yeah, I think December 14th is a loaded day for the entire sport, but that'll be a big day for the city, for both programs. I think it's going to be the best quality that you've seen in that rivalry in a long, long, long time. So
you came out with a stat on Twitter. It was how many years that one of the top 11 teams in the preseason has won a title?
I think it's 29. of the last 34. I tweeted it as a reply to somebody. I think it's 29 of the last 34 or 30 of the last 34, something of the realm, like 83% of the national champions were top 11 in the preseason AP poll. And I hate that that's true because the AP poll is garbage. Like, it means nothing in every single sport. The voters are biased. They're irresponsible. They have no idea what's going on. Most of them, not all, not most, a good chunk of them. But it's top 11 for some whatever weird reason. That's kind of how it is. So.
Okay, so give it to me this year. Who's in that? None of the Big 12 teams. Let's go outside the Big 12 right now. One of those
Sure.
teams in the top 11, and obviously UConn at number 3 is probably a popular pick for many, but who's cutting down the nets?
So it's funny. I started looking at this today, making a list of who I think can win the national title. I always, before the season, I'm like, usually anywhere from like 5 to 10 teams. I'm like, there's no one else that can win. Not a single chance in hell. I'm going to include the Big 12 teams. I'm looking at my rankings now without that list yet. Kansas, Bama, Houston, Gonzaga, UConn. That's 5. Duke is 6. And I'm hesitant to put anyone else in there right now, to be honest. Iowa State and Carolina and Baylor I'm interested in, and maybe Auburn, but I don't have a ton of confidence in any of the other teams winning outside of those, whatever, 5 or 6 I mentioned.
Are you, I don't know. I thought I saw this correctly. Are you like a analytics guy, advanced statistics? Are you into that?
Big time. Yeah.
Is there anything that pops out to you preseason? It can be about anything that you're like, this is either an outlier or a trend, like Charlie just mentioned, top 11 teams, that maybe a casual fan can go into the season and look smart to their buddies.
Yeah, preseason is tough because so much changes, like the current landscape of the sport, portal, NIL, all this stuff, where so many players and coaches are just like changing every year. So it's tough. The preseason metrics I don't take a lot of stock into because they're all predictive right now. They're not based on anything besides a sliver of what we had last year. But like I said, guys are changing. So example, whatever, Dylan Mitchell is not going to be the same player, the same exact player he was at UT. It's impossible to predict what he's going to be in a completely new system. But with teams that have the same coaches, you see a lot of the same systems. So, for example, like I'm thinking about Princeton because I was at Princeton earlier this week. They are one of the highest 3-point shooting volume teams in the country. You know they're going to have that this year, whether it's going to be effective or not. You know that's their style. So I would go back, look at reports and historical looks that I have done during the season last year. Like pace of play is a huge one that I love to look at, where you're not too fast, not too slow, or you can kind of play both ways, and see what coaches and programs have been able to do that at an effective level. And then look at the team on paper and be like, okay, are they good enough to get this team to the Final Four and to win a national title? So that was a long way of saying no. But after the first few weeks, like once you get into Maui, right after Maui, which will be the end of November, that is when I start to look at everything, because basically every team in the country has played at least a few really good opponents. And you can kind of start to judge them based on that, because when they go into conference play and they only play teams in their conference, you forget that they played a Big 12 team and an ACC team back in November and December. And those are the things you have to consider when you look at them in March. So.
I want to ask you kind of last one for you, how the game is trending. And I mean, with the NBA, it's turned into such a run and gun, shoot a bunch of threes. The team that's hitting a bunch of threes is typically winning a championship, or the championship team's usually in the top 3. College basketball's kind of, it's been a stalwart somewhat. We've kind of gotten the bigs, the Zach Edey's of the world that dominate. Nonstop. Team that wins a championship typically has a pretty nice big. Do you see the game changing at all? I know that when the Bearcats were having a lot of their success in the 90s and 2000s, they were in-your-face pressure. It was full-court pressing. Pitino and Louisville had teams like that too. What do you kind of see the style at nowadays, or is it just a sport that has a wide variety of ways to get it done?
Yeah, it's funny. I think the sport will change. Every sport changes, obviously, and I think the highest quality of every sport changes the fastest and the most, because you have to innovate to keep winning, and you have to innovate to keep winning on the college level too. But the disparity between the college and the NBA level is astronomical. If people don't think that's true, then they're missing something, and that's fine. But there's a reason that NBA fans think the college game is stuck in the past. It kind of is, because the quality of player for 364 teams is not there like it is for 30 NBA teams. So you can't progress the game so easily for every single program. Now, there are programs, if you look at their X's and O's, UConn is a great example. Houston, Baylor used to run the no middle defense that Iowa State now runs, and Texas Tech used to run it. There are things that teams are starting to take more of. A lot of offensive sets, like there are certain, like we can nerd out all day, zoom action sets and horn sets and stuff to get guys in more actions. And it honestly is rooted from analytics. Every successful coach uses analytics in the college game, and whether that's for certain zones on the floor to find certain shots, or off certain dribbles, or against certain looks, certain defensive looks. It's really a numbers thing that people are like I said, I was at Princeton the other day. They take all their shooting zones for each player in scrimmages in practice, and they'll go over it for an hour after, because they need you to say, hey, you have to get 2 feet more to the left to get this into 6% higher shot. Like, they will do things like that. So it's hard to notice that with the naked eye when you're watching a game, because you just think, okay, they're just running the same kind of play that they ran before, but it might be a little different because guys are 5 down towards the baseline or towards the block or something like that. And a little bit of a ramble answer, but there are parts of the game that will always stay how they are. And I think that's a good thing, because it's just different. It's just very unique. So,
do you have a National Player of the Year candidate? Is it somebody that we're just gonna be like, okay, this is an obvious pick? Like Hunter, I mean, I keep mentioning Hunter Dickinson. I know Mark Sears is a trendy pick now with Alabama.
yeah, it's really tough to go against them. I'd say RJ Davis is definitely the third guy, because Carolina's going to score. If you watched their game against Memphis last night, they don't play amazing defense. They are going to score a buck ton. They might average 85 points a game, 80, 85, something like that, especially in the ACC. And RJ is the truth of a point guard. He is unbelievable. Not to take away from Hunter or Mark, they're probably the front runners. Realistically, it's probably going to be one of those three. I don't know if Cooper Flagg goes like crazy enough every single night from the start to be able to grab it, but crazier things have happened, right? There's always guys like Janai Broom, Ryan Kalkbrenner, bigs that I think could really terrorize and take you even a bigger jump. But I can't see many players winning it besides the few that we just mentioned.
Good stuff from Ryan Hammer. You could follow him on Twitter at RyanHammer09. I mean, just the knowledge that the listeners picked up today from Ryan, that right there deserves to hop on Twitter right now. If you're not driving, of course, when you're parked, and give him a follow on Twitter. And while you're at it, Ryan, get rid of the Baylor picture. Come on, get rid of the Baylor picture. Put a picture of you in a Juan Dixon jersey up there.
You know what's actually, I have a Len Bias jersey I'll throw on real fast. RIP, but I'll throw that on and do something like that. Or maybe I'll just take on with like a black hoodie. That's what I'm thinking I need to do, because people all the time, you're a biased Baylor fan. I'm like, nope, don't care at all. So
good stuff, man. Thanks for popping on the show today.
Of course, appreciate you guys.